Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And today we're talking about Harriet, which we've just seen. It's the biopic of Harriet Tubman, who is, or was I should say, a very well known slave-turned-abolitionist during the 1800s.
Yes.
Who is a figure who is constantly, in recent years at least, sort of touted as someone who should be on a bill in America. You know, like she's that kind of level of heroine.
Yes.
American currency has never had a black person on, nor a woman, I don't think. So I think that's part of the reasoning behind wanting her on. But you know, she is someone who deserves it. And this film primarily tells the story of her escape from slavery to Philadelphia, and then her becoming part of the Underground Railroad, which was the network of safe houses and people.
Yes, it's not an actual railroad.
Yeah, I can't. For some reason, I still can't get the image out of my head of a genuine underground railroad.
Yes.
Never can. But it was a network of...
Neither can Real Housewives of Atlanta.
It was a network of people and safe houses, as I say, and kind of transportation links and that sort of thing that helped free slaves, help them escape to the north, where they could take on new identities and become free. And she, during her time with the Underground Railroad, freed about 70 slaves. And then during the Civil War, this is something that the film covers right at the end in intertitles. You don't really see this. During the Civil War, she led a huge expedition that freed something like 750 slaves in one go.
So the only female commander of an American army unit is one of the things that they say at the end. Yeah.
Was it one or just one of very few? I can't remember.
I think... Well, my memory says one.
Yeah, maybe it was. So, a huge figure. And deserving of a biopic. And I think deserving of a better biopic than this.
Yes.
Which I found, to say the least, formulaic.
Yes, I mean, kind of all kinds of ethical things were going on in my mind. Because, you know, to be honest, I dreaded going to see it.
Oh, really?
I did. Because, you know there's going to be horrible scenes of, slavery and, torture stuff. I mean, the kind of films about slavery are always tough to see. On the other hand, I do feel there's an obligation to see them, right? It's kind of, it's part of American history. It's part of people's kind of lived experience, I suppose, even nowadays, right? So I think, to respect kind of the historical fact of it, I kind of, you force yourself to see things like this. And sometimes they end up, being, in my view, great works of art, like 12 Years a Slave, and sometimes you get stuff like this one.
I don't know why I had the impression that the reviews of this had been very good, because I just looked up the general gist, and they're mixed. So I don't know, I mean, I was really, really looking forward to it, because I had it in my mind that people loved this.
Yes.
So maybe that's set an expectation that wasn't matched.
Well, maybe people do. I mean, maybe there's a segment of, a black audience in the United States for whom this is very important. And I do remember kind of a time where there was almost an absence of representation and, where this would have been of massive, just social significance. I also feel, in a way, bad about not liking it more, because you can see how, all of the cast and, all of the filmmakers, I mean, kind of, there is a level, you can see there's a kind of an investment in this project, really.
I don't feel bad about not liking it more. I think it should be better. I mean, yes. I would put it down to sort of holding the film to a higher standard.
The thing that bothered me most about it all was actually the story that was being told. That Harriet has visions and premonitions, and so this is a film that's done by people who have faith, and for whom faith is the great motivator. Now, for someone outside of a religious schema of understanding like myself, it's a problem, because every time she kind of tumbles down and has a vision, it becomes almost kind of laughable to me. So, and then kind of you feel this discomfort because you don't want to laugh because it's disrespectful. But on the other hand, I think it's so stupid. They could have found a better way of telling the story, because there's a difference between, portraying people of faith and treating faith respectfully, than actually having faith as, the plot mechanism through which Harriet succeeds in freeing slaves. Yeah, and I think that's a really important distinction.
I agree in part, but I don't agree that this comes across as a film made by people who have faith. Exactly. You're told when she escapes and she meets the Leslie Odom Jr. character, who is her kind of first contact on the Underground Railroad, he takes her story and he writes it down. And one thing that she talks about is this injury that she suffered when she was 13. Her skull was fractured. And from then, her visions, she describes it as kind of opening her more to God, to her conversations with God. And what he writes down, which I think is done as kind of a joke, the way it's done, is as a comic moment. What he writes down is possible brain injury.
Yes, I didn't think it as a comic moment.
Possible brain damage. Because it's a kind of... the reason I think it's comic is because it takes her really invested belief, and there's a bathos to it, it kind of turns it into maybe she's just got brain damage. But I think that idea of her brain damage and this injury that she had is central to the scenes of her visions, because I think it means that she, I don't think the film is suggesting that that God really exists and that is speaking to her. It suggests that she is having these visions because of this injury that she
But actually, what it shows you, because it's not even suggesting, it's showing you, it is showing you these visions, that she has these visions of what will happen. So, the film is not distancing itself from that.
No, I think it's kind of playing half and half, but I think for me, what came across is that she got lucky an awful lot.
Well, I mean, had the film done anything like that, actually, I would have found it better. Because actually, I don't think the film does that. I think the film shows her at kind of various moments being overtaken by, the spirit, and having visions. And then those visions dictate her actions, really. And sometimes those visions reappear, as something that is happening. So to me, it feels like a 1940s movie about the saints. Yeah, it's a film that is imbued with faith, and which I suppose, it's okay. But actually, to have the supernatural be a motor for the story like this, to me, was a problem.
I do agree, and maybe I should kind of clarify. Like, I did have real trouble with those scenes because, as you said, I joked to you at one point. Oh, a Spidey sense is tingling. There is like a weird superhero thing going on, and so there's the scene in particular where she returns to Maryland, where she escaped from, collects a number of members of her friends and family, and is leading them out. And we see separately that her masters and owners and all the white people are congregating on a bridge, expecting her to cross there. And then she falls to her knees, having a vision, and says, no, that's where they congregate, we need to cross somewhere else. And so they do. And then the crossing the river has its own kind of, she's called Moses, and it has a kind of crossing of the Red Sea thing where you really think the river should be deeper than this, and she manages to cross it just walking. And so, it's like the film is... I don't want to say it's trying to have its cake and eat it, because I don't think it's doing that exactly, but it just has a very, very confused notion of what these visions are, and exactly, like, whether they speak to kind of intuition, or... It's very, very confused, and it doesn't make anything clear, and I found it very uncomfortable to watch that stuff, really. Yes. Because I didn't know what to make of it.
Yes.
And I didn't know what the film wanted me to make of it. Is the film suggesting that she gained some access to a kind of intuition? I'm just left with questions about it.
Anyway, it doesn't work.
No.
Because it's a deus ex machina type of thing, where, you have a problem and then you resolve it with a vision. So, kind of...
and it was something, incidentally, that I wanted to look up just afterwards, because I wanted to know how much of that was based in truth. And what I looked up suggested that she did, her injury was real, and she did have what she believed were premonitions. She was a very faithful woman who believed God was speaking to her. So it's kind of, on the surface, it is faithful to the real woman.
Yeah, but there's a difference between somebody believing they have visions and actually the film objectively showing you those visions as like a historical
Yeah, exactly.
truth.
It's the way it's filmed and visually portrayed to us that is what's in question here.
Yeah. So, and I don't know, I thought it was a very pedestrian film with a very attractive cast. Though again, I thought all of the supporting players were wonderful, but I did think that the central character lacked complexity, as the film lacked complexity. You know, there would have been a way of suggesting other dangers and traps and, you know, kind of, you know, what is a single woman in Philadelphia, you know, who's just kind of escaped slavery, what kinds of things does she have to overcome or confront, you know, before she's settled enough, right? You know, so kind of you think, well, she must have been hungry, she must have been cold, you know, she must have like not known people, she must have been kind of sexual prey to some of the men there. Like, there's just so many things that you could have indicated with a look or that are just absent, really.
In terms of feeling, I found it completely sterile. There were 2 moments when I actually felt something, and none of them is, for instance, during her escape, where I think it was completely devoid of tension or kind of horror or anything like that. The 2 moments I felt something were a real split-second moment when she first meets the Leslie Odom Jr. character, and he's taking down her story, and he says, "Who did you come with?" And she said, "I'm alone." And he doesn't believe her for a second, and then there's a look on his face, and he talks about how impressed he is with the fact that she has made this 100-mile journey to freedom on her own. And I thought, wow, you know, I got that, and I felt that. And then the other time I felt something was right at the end, when the intertitles come up telling you Harriet Tubman's story after that, saying she went on to free these slaves, she went on to fight in the Civil War, and she went on to die in the 1900s, which I didn't know, at the age of 91. And I thought, you know, and I said to you, good for her, and I meant it, you know, and I felt something then, because I thought, hey, what a woman. But that's it. And for a film that, especially a film that is using its score so oppressively to indicate feeling, I found it really disappointing. And actually, I think the score in particular destroys every scene it's in. It's so keen to tell you that this is a moment of triumph, or this is a moment of sadness, or this is a moment of happiness. I really loathed it, and I commented on, you know, I said very few things during the film, but I commented on that to you at one point, because I had to make sure you also were noticing how awful the score was.
Yes. Yeah, it's almost, I don't know what else to say about this.
I think it's a cheap film.
I don't think
it's cheap in sentiment. I think it means everything it says, and it wants, and it's made with a real integrity of feeling behind it. But I think it's badly made and uses cheap storytelling devices.
Yes, that I agree with. And actually, I thought also, you know, so for example, it has a very attractive cast, but what's his name? Vaughn Curtis Hall as the Reverend.
Yeah.
Right. I thought kind of, you know, from the face up, he was fine. But then with the rest of his body, I thought he was very stiff.
Right.
Kind of, you know, unrelaxed, really. Anyway, but I'm grappling at straws. I mean, I think, you know, this is such a difficult film in a way, because I do think it's badly made, actually. On the other hand, I do think it is communicating an important story through a mechanism that is probably understood by its intended audience. Yeah, so if this is a film made for black people, you know, and it's kind of, you know, made for black people of faith, maybe there's a different way into this film than the one kind of I'm approaching it from. Yeah, I mean, I suppose my question is, you know, is it kind of communicating to its intended audience through these means that are not necessarily getting to us? And actually that I don't know. You know, it's not very well made. It's overly respectable. It is kind of burdened by history in some ways. And also, I don't believe the way that it conceptualizes people, right? So the plot divides everything into kind of mechanisms. So there's the bad black guy who's like a slave hunter, right? And, you know, there's the sister who doesn't want to be free because, and and she gets to say that statement, "Don't judge us," right? So all of these characters are kind of, I suppose, fulfilling kind of points, but they don't feel like people.
I know what you mean. Although I did believe the moment, I suppose. Well, I believed up to a point, the moment where the sister, when Harriet comes back to try and rescue her, and the sister works in the big house and is really kind of embedded with the family and finds it difficult to leave. And she says, "Don't, how dare you judge me? We do what we can to stay sane." Now that's a moment that is written to kind of indicate something to its audience.
Yes.
It's a very
part of a message.
She like it's not believable that she would express herself in that way, but the sentiment, I think, is plausible and believable. And so I kind of bought that moment. I bought as well, to some degree, the conception of Harriet in terms of she doesn't, it's not like she leaves and immediately goes into freeing slaves. It's not like that's her kind of purpose. She escapes because she can, and it's kind of opportunistic, and she leaves her entire family behind, including her husband, who is free.
Yes.
Because she just has to get out of there that moment, She manages to make her way to Philadelphia into the hands of the Underground Railroad, and it's a year later that she goes back to try and get her husband, right? And her story, her quest is a personal one at this point. She's not going back for an ideological mission. She's going back because she can't live without her husband. And her ability to do that, although you find out that her husband, thinking that she's dead, has moved on. Anyway, her kind of ability to do that, I suppose, believably empowers her to think that she can do this for other people and get the rest of her family and friends back, which is what leads to her multiple journeys down south to do that.
I know, but I just found it all so unconvincing,
I thought that was plausible. The journey from a personal to an ideological
thing. Well, it being plausible and it being good. I mean,
yeah, I know.
So the thing is, here is this black woman going into the South, right, to free slaves, and you never get a sense of tension or danger or smarts, or she must have overcome thousands of potential traps, right? That all could have been rendered in an exciting way, right? And also the character could have been conceptualized in a different way, as somebody who was smarter, than is indicated, and who was harder or more unpleasant, who maybe was overly focused on something that, I agree.
I agree, and I think the thing about the visions is central to that problem, because she's not portrayed as someone overly smart, although she's not dumb, but she's someone who is subject to these visions and obeys them kind of without question, because she believes they're from God, and that is an uncomfortable sort of thing to be observing, because you question how I suppose you want to believe that she was in charge of herself, and
well, she had to be.
Yeah.
You can't believe what she did, going so many times, right, into zones that were very, very dangerous, and in fact with people looking for her and with a price on her head. Imagine if somebody was doing a Western, right, with kind of a structurally similar narrative. It would have been exciting, suspenseful. It might have had funny moments. You could have built a real heroine out of her by just humanizing her more and making kind of the dangers more vivid. But the film eschews all of this. Just get on your knees and have a vision, and you shall be free.
Yeah, I agree.
It's dumb.
It is dumb. It is dumb, and that is my central thing. I think she is a person who is deserving of a better story than this, better film than this.
Yes.
So because it seems to be, on paper, this is pretty much what happened, but on paper isn't enough. It's in the evocation of feeling and tone, that sort of thing, and that's all very, very blank, very, very still. I don't like the way it's filmed. It's filmed with a kind of on the hoof handheld aesthetic a lot of the time that vaguely puts you in place, but you don't feel that there are very few shots that feel evocative of a feeling or beauty or horror or anything that it might. The filmmaking fails to evoke feeling, and that is central to my problem with it, I suppose.
Yes. Though I think it would be curious to say, does it fail to evoke feeling with us? Or does it fail to evoke feeling in general? So, but actually, whether it evokes feeling, amongst black audiences, I still think it's a poorly made film.
Yeah.
So.
I also just quickly thought there was an interesting class thing, which reminded me of 12 Years a Slave, in fact, because one of the interesting kind of smaller points, I suppose, about 12 Years a Slave, or details about that film, was that the central character, Solomon Northup, was a free man and he was kidnapped into slavery, and there was something about his character that was a snob, in a way, towards the other slaves he was with, that he felt he was better than them. Yeah. And there's a class thing very lightly going on here when Harriet gets to Philadelphia.
No, there should have been more of that, but there wasn't.
Yeah.
Right? Because you would imagine that there would be all of these class differences, and categorical difference, and people treating each other differently and so on, because one is a free person, one was born a free person in Philadelphia, and the other is an escaped slave from the South. That would instantly kind of, one owns property, the other one is working as a maid. You would normally expect there to be just like clashes or differences or snubs or something to overcome so that they could be friends. No, the film ignores all of that.
The Janelle Monáe character you're referring to there, who owns the business,
instantly welcoming, instantly admiring, instantly friends, in fact dies for her, right? I mean, it's kind of.
Yeah,
I don't want to keep beating a dead horse. Actually, I think we should just.
Well, I wanted to say something slightly different. I didn't just want to. I wanted to slightly try and think about it, just in that. Yeah, I thought it was an interesting moment when you're introduced to Janelle Monáe's character and she describes being born free and owning a business and all this, and it very clearly points out strong differences between the two of them, her and Harriet, and she apologises for being free. She's there's like a weird kind of survivor's guilt thing where Harriet says something to her about not having those experiences, not having that fear.
Yes.
And she apologises for not having that fear, which is a weird thing. And then in that speech she gives, Harriet gives to the kind of higher ups, I suppose, of the Underground Railroad towards the end, which is supposed to be very rousing, and I didn't think it really worked, but she kind of chides some of them, including those who had formerly been slaves, for not being forceful enough in their drive to free slaves, and saying even those of you who had been slaves have forgotten what it was like.
I mean, this is where I think, like, I just don't buy anything the film has to say, because, if you were a black woman in Philadelphia in 1850, in the 1850s, to think that you wouldn't have had to put up with racial oppression or indignities or, you wouldn't understand anything of any of that. It's just absurd. So, I actually don't mind that the Harriet Tubman character brought it up, but you could have made it more interesting by making it more complex.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I think you're right about that she dies for her, and yeah. It's a bit easy, I suppose, in storytelling terms. I mean, I don't know how.
And also contradictory, because basically, her dying gives a lie to all that Harriet had said, of her before. She dies, partly because she's a black woman.
Yeah.
I mean, those two guys wouldn't have treated a white woman, the same way. So, in fact, at the end, even her property and so on couldn't protect her. So, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think it was very good, but I think it probably is one of those films where it's good to remind yourself of, as you've been doing, that other people may look at this differently.
Yes, I'm sure they will, and it's a film on an important subject made by a black woman, very significant, a black woman who in fact kind of made Eve's Bayou, one of the key films I think of the 90s really, in terms of representation. So I don't want to be dismissive, right? On the other hand, I feel there's very little I can say in support of it that would be honestly thought or felt by me. Which is why, I think we should just end, because it does feel like, beating a dead horse.
Casey Lemons is the director. We should name that she is the creative force behind it. I think she wrote and directed.
Yes.
So
she takes all the blame.
Suppose so.
Thank you very much for listening. We are Eavesdropping at the Movies, and we are on
iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Spotify to listen to us. on social media. We're on Facebook and Twitter, and our website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.